I just want to say really quickly that we need to be really careful not to repeat conservative talking points. Canada most definitely is not broken.
One thing that I would like to ask Mr. Carney, because yesterday he made some mentions of sectors that he would protect over others. And I think what is really important is to understand which sectors you're willing to protect, but which sectors you would negotiate away.
In a negotiation, if there are things that should never enter into the negotiation, language, culture, our water, you make clear at the start of the negotiation that they are off the table.
Mark, you talked about reaching NATO targets, but of all of us on stage, you plan to reach those not until 2030, but the imperative to do that is now. You talked about the fact that the Arctic is under threat. We don't have time to wait for this. We have to actually make sure that we are investing here in Canada.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Frank Bayless, and I'm a professional engineer. As a businessman, I built several companies in the healthcare sector, and along with that, I've created thousands of good-paying, high-technology jobs. I know how to build strong teams. I know how to find good people and work with them to achieve results. I'm going to focus on three priorities. Number one, I want to build a strong and resilient economy that we all benefit from. Number two, I want to improve our healthcare system so that it becomes the best healthcare system in the world. And it's not going to cost more money, it's going to save money. And three, I want to modernize the federal government such that it becomes much more efficacious, better at delivering services to our Canadian citizens. Together, we will build a proud and prosperous Canada for all Canadians.
Meeting the moment. That's why we're here tonight. Growing up in a middle-class family in Burlington, Ontario, and now having two kids of my own, I get what Canadians are going through as Canadians across this country meet the moment. And tonight, each of us on this stage need to meet the moment. Tonight, I am going to raise the tough questions we need to confront as Liberals, have an honest conversation about where we stand on the big issues we face as Canadians, and present a clear plan for the future of this country. If we do not do that, we will lose the next election. Our opponents may wish that Canada is broken, but we know as Liberals, this is a great country. Now is the time for hope. I am the leader we need, and together we can build the Canada we want. And I'm asking you to join me.
A few weeks ago in Saskatoon, I met a 4-year-old girl named Ari. She asked me, "Can you stop Trump from invading Canada?" Ari is a smart girl, and she's asking the right question. A leader who can say to Ari and to everyone across our great country, "I will fight for you. I will fight for Canada. And together, we will win."
Very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Carney. I was born in the Northwest Territories, and I grew up in Edmonton. During my career, I've had the honor of serving our country, including as governor of the Bank of Canada during the financial crisis of 2008, a plan that builds a strong economy that works for you. Canadians are ready to stand up for their country. I'm ready to stand with them and bring the right change for Canada. Thank you.
Why are you the best person positioned to do this? And
So I've negotiated hundreds and hundreds of contracts with Americans over my 40-year career. And from time to time, I run into the character of Mr. Trump, so it's not new to me. On this point, I published a letter one day before his inauguration when I said clearly he's not going to put 25% tariffs on everything, but he's going to attack certain industries. The first one I said he's going to attack is steel. It's exactly what he did. I tell you this to tell you that I know how to deal with him. And it's important to understand that Mr. Trump is a bully. And you do not give 1 inch to a bully. I have the experience and the expertise to deal with Donald Trump. I can predict what he'll do, and then I can help build our defenses to stop him from doing those things, and also counterattack, which unfortunately is going to be necessary. This way, I will protect our country, I will protect our economy, I will protect our culture, and I will protect our sovereignty.
I think in a situation like this, you need experience in terms of crisis management. You need negotiating skills, but you also need economic expertise, because part of the way to deal with this situation is to do what we should have been doing and what we need to do as a country, which is to build a strong economy. Now, let me finish by pointing out one other thing. Who's the worst person to stand up to Donald Trump? It's Pierre Poilievre. He worships the man. He uses his language. He's not the right person for our country at this crucial time.
Again.
Look, men like Donald Trump have always underestimated leaders like me. But they underestimate me, and that's their mistake. And you can't bring a calculator to a knife fight. You have to fight very strongly and with the right tools. And that's exactly what I'm going to do as Prime Minister.
First 5-minute debate.
I think you forgot, Christia.
Oh my gosh.
That's no
First
problem.
mistake by the moderator. My apologies.
Trump represents the biggest threat our country has seen since the Second World War. I have recognized that from the outset. I've built my campaign on a plan to answer that threat by recognizing that, yes, we depend on the U.S., but they depend on us too. We are their largest market by far. We sell them the things we need. A smart, tough negotiator who stands up to Trump can activate those Americans who need us, get them to lobby him. That's how we get a win-win outcome. That's how Canada wins.
Why is President Trump doing this to Canada?
Well, President Trump needs to show that he has a win on the border. And he's got himself elected by saying he's going to deal with illegal immigration. And right away, he puts out a tweet saying there's a problem with Canada and Mexico. The problem is, for him, there is no problem with Canada. We know it, and the Americans know it. So he's trying to make one so that he can later solve it. Now,
Trump is starting with us for a very simple reason. If you can show the world that you can beat up on Canada, your best friend, your reliable, trustworthy neighbor, then think about how the rest of the world feels. It is the demonstration effect. It is saying, if I can beat up on those guys, imagine what I can do to you.
I'm going to pick up on what Christia just said, because I think underlying all this is what President Trump is looking for is to dominate the hemisphere. He wants to enlarge U.S. power into Canada, into Greenland, into the Panama Canal, as was just mentioned. So the stakes are very, very high. This is a serious crisis, not just an economic crisis. It's a crisis of sovereignty.
You know, see where my colleagues are going, and I appreciate, I think all of that is probably true, except what did we just see in Ukraine? He did a deal with Putin for critical minerals in Ukraine. Who else has critical minerals? Canada. And so we need to understand what the U.S. is trying to do here, but we also need to make sure that we are standing up for our sovereignty and for our economy. You know, last night there was a bunch of conversations with colleagues who said, well, I'm not even going to talk to Donald Trump. Well, guess what? We don't have that choice. We have to talk to him.
I'm going to go fly down and meet President Sheinbaum of Mexico. It's a very strong, smart lady. And I'm going to make a deal with her and say, look, we need to stand up together to Mr. Trump. He said he's putting 25% tariffs on both of us. He can't do that. It'll destroy his economy. So we need to call his bluff. And then what we need to do is take off the table what was already given for nothing, which is the work that we were going to do on our border for $1.3 billion and the work that she was going to do on her border, and say, you know what? That's off the table now. We're back to square zero. That's how I will deal with President Trump.
Okay,
You have
Mr.
to be able to do more than one thing at one time as Prime Minister. So that means building the economy. It means negotiating with allies, leveraging our critical minerals, leveraging our clean energy with those allies. That's critically important. And hitting hard with a real negotiation with President Trump, which includes dollar-for-dollar tariffs, includes using all the cards potentially that we have, and they are considerable as the U.S.'s largest client.
But President Trump is with him. Weakness is a provocation, and capitulation is not a negotiating strategy. The great thing is right now, Canadians get it. There is this wave of patriotism in Canada, and Canadians are going to stand and fight for Canada. They need a leader who knows how to lead that fight and rally that wave of patriotism. I'm the leader who can do that.
One thing that I would like to ask Mr. Carney, because yesterday he made some mentions of sectors that he would protect over others. And I think what is really important is to understand which sectors you're willing to protect, but which sectors you would negotiate away. And that is something that I think as Canadians, we need to understand, because as Prime Minister, I'm not going to negotiate any of those sectors away. I'm going to stand up for people in every single province and territory, every single sector, to make sure that we protect Canadian jobs and protect our industries.
Okay.
Let me be clear about a few things. One, not everyone would have watched the debate last night. So in a negotiation, if there are things that should never enter into the negotiation, language, culture, our water, you make clear at the start of the negotiation that they are off the table. Second thing is that the other aspects, for example, our auto sector, I'll give an example, which is intimately and interconnected with the United States. We're going to negotiate around maintaining a good deal for our auto sector. But that is not the same as accepting a bad deal, Karina.
Well, I got a better deal than we had before. We changed the rules of origin for car parts that it gave an advantage to high-wage Canadian workers. That's the kind of approach we need to take.
Ms. Gould, what do you think Canada should be doing with our allies? And we did hear some discussion in the opening statements about this, given the shifting geopolitical sands around the globe.
Over the past week, Donald Trump has been negotiating away Ukraine's sovereignty and their territorial integrity. We saw President Trump abandon the free world throughout this process. We absolutely need to shore up our allies with democracies around the world because our democracy is under threat. We need to protect the values that we care about. What does that look like? It means reaching the 2% NATO target, not because the US asked us to, but because we need to as Canadians. It means making sure that we stand up for our values around the world, that we continue with our important international assistance.
It's a great question because what is different about this unleashed and empowered President Trump is he is clearly threatening our sovereignty, and we need to respond.
So we can use this to our advantage. Now we can say to them, let's get together and target Donald Trump and target some of his industries. I'll give you an example. So Boeing Airlines, they have to sell planes all around the world, and they have competitors that can also compete with them and sell planes we can buy from Embraer, we can buy from Airbus and that. So we should get together with them and say, look, we're going to bankrupt Boeing. The Canadian government should also do this. Under the same guise that he's using to impose these tariffs on us, we should say, you know what? It's an emergency situation, and we got to relook at our defense spending, where we're buying planes from the United States. We're buying all kinds of defense industry products from the United States. And you know what? We're going to put them on hold for now, and if this continues for a couple more weeks, we're going to cancel them.
So there is an opportunity, in fact, a necessity, an imperative here for us to work with like-minded countries on the new security architecture. Yes, we have to step up for our contribution. How we protect our Arctic, which is under threat, not just now from the Russians and the Chinese, but from potential U.S. incursions. Serious, serious issue.
Mark, you talked about reaching NATO targets, but of all of us on stage, you plan to reach those not until 2030, but the imperative to do that is now. You talked about the fact that the Arctic is under threat. We don't have time to wait for this. We have to actually make sure that we are investing here in Canada, reaching those targets, because our country, our sovereignty is under threat, and we are in a new world. And so the time to make those investments is now.
I do believe we need to hit 2% by 2027, and we need to be focused on spending the money here in Canada with Canadian companies. But I want to be sharing a message from all of us directly with President Trump. What you are hearing from the Liberal Party of Canada is our sovereignty is not negotiable. Canada is not for sale. We are going to stand with all Canadians and not become the 51st state. And Pierre Poilievre wants to imitate you, but we are going to defeat him. And together, we're going to fight for Canada.
So as Prime Minister, what would your priority be to strengthen our economy?
I'll start my answer by saying this will be one of my top priorities jointly with these issues that we just touched on, largely with the U.S. and the threats to our security. A focus on building our economy on several layers. First and foremost, this is a time to build. We have an enormous opportunity to build our economy. That means building millions of homes. We're millions of homes short in this country. Everyone who's trying to buy a home is aware of that, particularly young. It's building infrastructure, both conventional energy infrastructure and clean energy infrastructure. It's building up on the conversation we just had on intelligence infrastructure. It is diversifying our trade partners with new trading routes, and it's creating one Canadian economy.
I think your question was actually about the cost of living for Canadians. It wasn't about, the macroeconomic picture, which we know is doing okay for Canada. But when Canadians, people, don't feel like that. It's not working for them. I'm glad to hear, my colleague talk about housing. It's one of the first times I've heard him talk about it during this campaign. I put out a very bold, ambitious plan on housing that would eliminate homelessness, that would build millions of homes, and that would help first-time homebuyers get into the market. I've proposed a 1% GST tax cut from 5 to 4% to help Canadians with the immediate cost of everything. And I've put forward a plan to modernize our social safety net and put us on a path towards a basic income.
An economic plan, I call it my prosperity plan, and I'm going to bring fiscal discipline to Ottawa, and yes, we're going to have to stop running deficits. It has a direct impact on the value of our dollar, and that has a direct impact on affordability. So I will not be cutting the GST. I'm going to modernize our healthcare system to get it to do a lot better with less. That's our biggest spend for provinces, our biggest transfer from the federal government.
All economic plans today have to start with an effective response to President Trump. He is the biggest economic menace our country and Canadians are facing. I have a plan to make us united, strong, and smart, and to win. I think we also all recognize that President Trump is also handing us a golden opportunity. Canadians right now really get how wonderful Canada is, and they understand we're under threat. And so today we have a chance, a once-in-a-generation chance, to make Canada stronger, richer, more prosperous, more resilient.
Last year in Canada, there were over 2 million visits to food banks. That's the highest in our history. For people who are at home, how would you make it more affordable for them?
The first thing is my government will make a middle-class tax cut. Secondly, my government will remove, as Ms. Freeland will, remove the GST for first-time home buyers. This is a crucial point, getting on the home ladder. We need to, if we have one Canadian economy, we can reduce prices by 15%. If we have greater competition in our economy, which my government will deliver, in groceries, in broadband, in transportation.
When my colleagues talk about households, I talk about families. When they talk about, the macro picture, I talk about what it means for individuals. And I'm so proud that I was able to deliver affordable childcare for families across this country. And I would expand that to include before and after school care as well. But when we're talking about people who are going to food banks, we're talking about the most vulnerable in our society. A middle-class tax cut or removing the GST on new homes isn't going to help those folks. But
as finance minister, one of the things I was so grateful to be able to do was to introduce in my first budget a national system of early learning and childcare. And it was wonderful to work first with Ahmed Hussein, get that first crucial deal with BC and a bunch more. And then Ahmed handed the baton to Karina, and we worked together. This is generational. It's transformational for Canada. My affordability plan includes 100,000 more childcare places. It includes a middle-class tax cut. It includes a cut on credit card fees. It includes a cut on taxes for first-time home buyers. The real threat to people working really hard and struggling to get by is not anyone on this stage. It is Pierre Poilievre. He will cut, cut, cut. He will bring in a cruel austerity that will hurt all the people in Canada who need the help the most. And that's why I'm proud to be a Liberal, and that's why I'm running to be the next leader of our party.
Now, what tends to happen with politicians, they did it this time. They brought the grocery store owners in and they yelled at them and screamed at them. But the reality is this. If you want to buy an orange, that grocery store has to go buy it in the United States in US dollars, bring it to Canada, convert it to Canadian dollars. Every time our dollar goes down, the price of that orange goes up. Now, if we want to get that down, working, we need to bring our dollar up and bring oranges, bananas, everything else down. That's the solution.
My plan, it's a time to build across this economy. We can go into more detail. It is going to be a great time going forward to be a worker in Canada. It is going to be a great time to be in the trades in Canada because we are going to build this country across this country for Canadians and with Canadians.
About poverty, We actually have to talk about people in poverty and what their lived experience is. When I was the Minister of Families, I worked on a national school food program that is now going to be supporting thousands of kids across this country and delivered childcare. But let's be clear, poverty costs us money, and investing to tackle and end poverty, like things like the Canada Child Benefit or increasing senior supports, is going to benefit all of us.
I just want to say really quickly that we need to be really careful not to repeat conservative talking points. Canada most definitely is not broken. We are a strong, resilient country. Canadians live 4 years longer than Americans, and median wealth in Canada is higher than in the US. Trump is giving us an opportunity to make a strong economy even stronger and more resilient. And I think as Liberals, we have to remember the great legacy of Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. We are the party that believes in social policy and economic policy.